Cash, we're all headed to the winter meetings next week. You obviously will be there. What's the first item on your agenda when you get there?
Well, we've been engaged. You know, obviously the work doesn't start when you get there. It's already started over the past month, dealing with potential trade partners and free agency. So we're just constantly trying to vet, you know, what's available and how would it fit in our arena, and you know, and even if it's available, you know, can it be obtainable? And so that's what we're trying to do, and we'll continue to do that. And you know, the setup down in the winter meetings, you know, that creates the atmosphere. It's, you know, pencils down, time to try to make most of your decisions. I think that's how the industry reacts, and so you'll see a lot of activity, you know, starting to transpire down there.
Brian, you talked yesterday about Ohtani saying no to the Yankees, as he did to a lot of other teams, and you said that months of preparation and maybe it ends up some false hustle on the Yankees' part. How do you pivot now going forward, and is CC Sabathia a natural fit for somebody you could go to try and add another pitcher to that rotation?
Well, we've been engaged with CC regardless, and you know, and even if we had Ohtani, he'd come into the minor league contract, but you know, it wasn't meant to be, as you just spoke to. You know, this franchise has been a tremendous home field advantage for so long for us, so it's very rare when it actually works against us in terms of location and what the city has to offer. But in Ohtani's case, for whatever reason, that was the case, and everything east of the Mississippi was disqualified. So we continue to stay engaged. We have a vacancy in the rotation with CC's free agency, whether that turns into CC eventually down the line, or if it's another free agent, or if it's a trade partner. Or we have to be patient and wait this stuff out. It remains to be seen, but that's what we're playing with right now and seeing as we can go through. Because you know, there's not a lot of great choices ever in the pitching arena, and that's why you know, they're difficult decisions to make.
Hey, Brian, one player that we know you will have next year is Gary Sanchez behind the plate, and he had an incredible year last year, but I think everybody would agree his defensive game maybe took a step backwards. Is that a focus this winter to get his defense back where it was in 2016?
Yeah, I think so. You know, he made great strides in his defense in the upper levels of player development, and then for the very first year as a full-time major leaguer in the hands of our major league coaching staff, it went backwards because I think some of the things got changed up on how he prepared in his pregame and in spring training, so things were run a little different, and I think it had an adverse effect as we move forward on him. So I think we're looking to turn the clock back to some of the routines that he utilized prior to last season, and that stuff benefited him in a much better way, and I think you know, we have a chance to get him back to where he was by doing so than what transpired during the regular season.
Brian, last year in the offseason, you made a splash by signing Matt Holliday to a one-year deal to be the DH. That may not have panned out exactly the way you had hoped. You also brought in Todd Frazier, who got some reps, obviously, at third base and could do some DHing as well. But a lot of people wonder what the plan is for this year. You've got so many options for that spot. Do you have a game plan right now for the DH spot in 2018?
You know, it's, I guess, to be determined. I mean, clearly we have, you saw how it went, as you said, how it went through with the playoffs. We have, you know, more outfielders than we have outfield spots, as long as everybody's healthy. We have some young, you know, guns that are pushing up from the system, whether it's, you know, Glaber Torres or Miguel Andujar, and you obviously have Starlin Castro at second. You got Headley at third, so you got some young kids pushing their way up, trying to make a name for themselves. And so, at the very least, if we didn't do anything, somebody out of that cast of characters of excess, whether it's young or older, could play a role there and handle that spot. We could use that in a rotating purpose, or you know, we can go out and acquire something or sign something to more solidify that. So that's what we're kicking through and making those type of assessments. And now that also with Aaron Boone in play, you know, obviously he's going to have a strong opinion in that situation as well. So, you know, we're working through it, but I don't know. I don't have a prediction yet how it's going to play.
Brian, a couple of weeks ago, you had a set your 40-man roster. You added 6 players to the roster. That included the likes of Gleyber Torres and McKinney and Acevedo. We're taking a look at those additions right now. But in order to make those additions, you also had to shed some players with a couple of trades. Can you take us inside that roster management and that roster crunch as you're trying to make sure that you hang on to as much talent as possible?
Yeah, it was. I tell you what, our staff, we were, huddled here for quite some time, really laser focused on roster. I hate to say it, cleanup, and that implies what we were having to ship out was not necessarily all that good, but that's not the case. We have a very deep farm system, but you're only allowed to protect as many as 40, in the Rule 5. And as you saw last year, we lost Luis Torres, a catcher that San Diego was able to select and then carry and barely play at all in the regular season, and he really didn't belong in the big leagues, but it didn't matter in their case. They were in a position of living to fight another day, so they just buried him at the end of their roster, and now they have him that they can send out on option going forward and start his development clock again. So anyway, we had to clear as many spots so we can protect as many young players that we valued the most, and that led to a lot of tough decisions and engaging so many clubs. It felt like trade deadline day or week while we were doing so, and I thought our staff did a great job of doing the best they can by clearing roster spot, room for the promotions, at the same time getting talent back that are non-Rule 5 eligible type players or international slot money in one case, as we were still trying to play on the Ohtani side.
Hey, Brian, the bullpen for your team last year was such a strength. You were able to shorten the games, and it was a valuable weapon. But one guy who struggled, kind of limping to the finish line, was Betances. Where do you envision him, or where do you think he's at right now as far as your bullpen is concerned?
Well, we still anticipate him being what he's always been, which is an important piece as we move forward in that pen. He did struggle towards the end, and obviously that was disappointing for him and for us, but thankfully we had other personnel that could pick up the slack, and Dellin has been carrying such an exemplary workload in terms of performance for quite some time. So I guess it's about time somebody else had to pick up the slack. For the small period of time he was not up to Dellin Betances type category, but he's been pretty special for a long time, and we're very fortunate to have him. And so we plan on having him in the system, and getting reacquainted now with a new manager, and he'll have hopefully full confidence in handing that ball every time we need him, because Dellin is going to be. He has been one of the reasons we've had so much success over the course of time, and we're going to bet on that again.
Brian, you've already alluded to the fact that you have a lot of exciting young players in the minor leagues. I want to ask you about one, though. His name comes up all the time. It's Glaber Torres. How realistic was it that we would have seen him in 2017 had he not gotten injured? And now that his rehab is going very well from Tommy John surgery, how realistic is it we'll see him in 2018?
I think it's very realistic on both ends. I think the way his season was going last year, that you would have seen him at some point. Who knows? He might have popped up here, and he might have been the DH at the very least. You're playing third base, with Headley DHing, whatever. You never know, and maybe the Todd Frazier side of it didn't have to play out. Even though that was a beneficial move. I mean, that could have been Glaber Torres, but when Glaber got hurt, it took him that chess piece off the table for consideration, and then we continued to move around and see what else was available to us to make us better, and so I think there's a real chance that without question, as long as he's healthy and performing like he had prior to the injury, that you will see him in the big leagues at some point in 2018. Whether it's sooner than later, remains to be seen. But that's our that's, I guess, the expectations and hope. But his performance will dictate that either way.
Brian, at this time last year, Aaron Judge was an uncertainty because of the way he had struggled in 2016. All he does is come out and hit 52 homers, win the Rookie of the Year, finish second in the AL MVP. I got a two-part question for you. Just what kind of expectations do you have for Judge going forward? And then also, do you expect that coming off that shoulder surgery that he'll be ready to go in spring training, no limitations?
Well, I'd say high expectations. I mean, it's hard to forget what he did and how he did it, and for how long he was able to do it, and continuing to do it in October. So, we feel we have a bona fide middle of the lineup and pack bat, even though we have him at least in the prior year batting second. But I think you're going to see him obviously getting some of the most at bats as he should next year. I think the shoulder issue is a resolved issue. It was something that was a choice whether they wanted to or not, and they could clean it up and fix it for him, and because it was bothering him for a period of time, and but all information from the operating physician out west, Dr. Elatraj, as well as our team doctor, is that the situation's resolved. He'll be ready to go in spring training.